Hey, good afternoon. Chief Davis here. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of our Challenges in the Streets program. Today is titled Be a CPR Boss. So we have actually some really good information coming this afternoon presented by Tim Burns and some folks from the EMS side of the house. Wanted to cover a few things as general. If you are a certified chief officer and you want to get COPDI credit for the program, then on our YouTube Live, you would need to sign in into your account, put your fire department ID when you sign on, and then, of course, remember at the end that you're going to have to put that ID again and before the episode's over. And then Chief Thomas will take care of assigning credit to that so that you get the appropriate amount of hours for watching the video. The questions also, remember, questions get typed and typed into the YouTube account. They will be asked when it's a convenient point to stop and do that of the presenters, so just have to be patient sometimes. Occasionally, that question may just be answered in a typing an answer back, but most of the time, we're good to go ahead and ask that. Program is slated for an hour. If sometimes, we may go a little bit longer. If we think that's going to happen, then somebody will give you an indication, hey, we may go an extra 5 or 10 minutes. We've seen that happen before in a couple episodes. So see how that goes today. All right, so the last time we were on the air, we had a photograph. We were talking about some first-in company actions. I get you guys to toss that picture up. So it's not our picture, right? The photographer credit's down there in the bottom. So this is out of Chicago. And it was a recent fire, and we asked folks who were watching to think about if you are the first arriving engine company officer. Nobody else is with you. I think we gave like 12:30, at night, 0100 hours, somewhere in that area. You don't know anything about anything about the building but what you see, right? Clearly there's a fire in that house. You don't know if it started on the outside or on the inside. You don't know if there's people trapped. Clearly got a lot of stuff going on, right, and you have no help. We asked you to start thinking about what might you do. Clearly some flow path stuff there, right? We've spent a lot of time talking about flow path over these few years. I want to show you the next photo in a moment, and I want you to think about how did it go from here to the photo that you're about to see. All right, let's see the next photo. It's the same house. I don't know a few things. I don't know what the situation is. Don't know if it was vacant. Don't know whatever. I don't know what happened between the last photo and this photo. All we know is that that fire grew exponentially pretty fast. I do know the time period. This isn't like a half hour later. It's a fairly relatively short period of time. Do know that the Chicago Fire Department, right, they go to a lot of fires. It's not like, well, this is the only fire we've seen this year. So if you go back to picture 1 for a minute, I would like you all who were thinking about this last time, just think about what happened to that fire, right? Whether fire department induced, whether, hey, it just happened. Think about what happened to drive that fire from the way it looks now to picture 2. And I'll take picture 2 now. Pretty dramatic, and I think it probably didn't take too long for that to happen. I don't know much else about the photos. I happened to catch it, come across the social media feed. I thought it was pretty interesting, and I thought it was a good opportunity to talk about this. So next month, in May, we're going to have some more scenario-type stuff. Some of the things that folks are doing in COLA are pretty good, and we want to try to send that out to everybody. So that's it for now. Enough fire stuff for now. We're going to switch gears a little bit, talk about EMS. Right, we run a lot of good EMS calls out there, and certainly CPR, we have come a long way in terms of the survivability of having a cardiac arrest. So I'm going to turn it over to Captain Tim Burns, and he is going to take it from here. Captain.
Thank you. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Captain Tim Burns. I am the EMIHS Quality Improvement Officer. Basically, I'm the data guy. A lot of what I do is determine or look at how the care that you folks provide in the field affects the patient outcomes and the processes that we deliver to patients. So I do want to talk about, what we do want to talk about is being a CPR boss. So, first of all, why is this important? If you could just advance the slide for me. All right, thanks. So why is this important? If we think of cardiac arrest and our response to it as a process, right? So patient suffers a cardiac arrest, they call us, we do our stuff, and the end of our process is usually when we deliver them to the hospital. But then the process continues throughout the hospital and the care that they receive and on to rehab and after they're discharged. If we examine it as a process, then we have a couple of measures that we can use to determine whether or not that process was successful. And a couple of them that we use are return of spontaneous circulation. And we define, Montgomery County, we define any ROSC as being any return of spontaneous circulation during the patient care as being a ROSC. So whether we get the pulse back before we get to the hospital and then lose it again, or if we get it back briefly, or if we don't get it back until after, we all know those questions that are in the eMeds form, and one of them is any ROSC, and there's a couple of different options for you to pick. So we track the percentage of resuscitations where we get any return of spontaneous circulation, and then I plot it out over month-long periods. And you can see our performance here on this slide. We're going back all the way to May of 2018. We had a couple of really good months in April of 2019. It started to taper off, and then you can see an abrupt drop-off when COVID began. But the actual performance right now is not as important as just knowing that, this is the kind of things that we look at, and one of the measures that we define successful process delivery for cardiac arrest is whether or not we get a ROSC. And then going on, the CPC 1 and 2 discharges. So CPC is cerebral perfusion or cerebral performance category. So 1 and 2 are good, either no neurodeficit after the arrest or moderate cerebral disability, but they can still live independently. And then 3 or 4 is a severe disability or coma. And if we go back one slide. Here's the bottom graph shows, the percentage of patients who we resuscitate who are discharged with a CPC 1 or 2. And this is really the holy grail of cardiac arrest resuscitation. This is really what we want to see, because what this means is that a patient suffered cardiac arrest while in our care, and they were eventually returned to their family, returned to their lives, neurologically intact. And you can see for the fiscal year to date, about 5.3% of our resuscitations end up in a patient being returned neurologically intact. And in the previous 12 months all told, it was 3.4%. We have seen some significant decreases in all of these measures since the beginning of COVID. We're looking into exactly why that is. But these two numbers, the 19 people for this fiscal year and 33 people in the previous 12 months came back from a cardiac arrest after receiving our care and were sent back into the community neurologically intact. And that's huge, and that is due to the good work that you folks do. And we're just looking to improve on that through good CPR. So how are we gonna do that? If you could do the next slide. All right. So, I'm sorry, back one. All right. We know that continuous compressions save lives, right? One thing that we've heard in the past 12 months is follow the science, follow the science. Well, the science around cardiac arrest leads us to believe that continuous compressions save lives. So we need to do them at the right rate, the right depth, and we need to limit the breaks in compressions to less than 10 minutes. And what this is this is a code stat report. So every time you hook someone up to the monitor and put those pads on, the monitor is actually recording every time you do a chest compression. And then we have some software that the EMS duty officers and I use to actually give us a graphical representation of the cardiac arrest through time and when there are continuous compressions and when there are breaks. Each one of those red lines is a chest compression, and it'll give us some metrics about what percentage of the time were you pressing on the chest, and what the rate of your compressions were. So if we move to the next slide. So how do we increase the quality of your CPR, right? And how do we improve the quality of the resuscitation that we deliver? So we have a playbook. This came out in September of 2020, and it's an appendix to the incident response policy, and it's titled Management of Cardiac Arrest. And within that playbook, right, so what this does is it defines the context of how we're going to deliver resuscitation within Montgomery County, right? So think of it as how we do business. It's our playbook. And one of the things that's defined in that is CPR Boss, right? So it says that the CPR Boss is the clinician who provides oversight and management of key basic life support interventions during an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest resuscitation. This is typically the unit officer of the first arriving piece of heavy apparatus, and that's where you guys come in, right? If you are riding the front seat of a fire truck, we need you to know that this is your job, right? You have a key part in the quality of this resuscitation and driving the resuscitation forward in the appropriate way, but then we also need you to know how to do it. And admittedly, when this policy this policy was issued, we didn't give a lot of instruction on how to accomplish the task, and that's what we'd like to do today, is really get into the nuts and bolts with a field-tested and common sense approach to how to be the CPR boss and how to deliver that. If we could have the next slide, right? So a couple of overview points about the incident response policy appendix. Being a successful CPR boss starts at lineup. And, you know, if you think about it, try and put it in the same context that you put responding to a fire call. So it's pretty, a lot of the unit officers that I've worked with, I know that I try to do this when I'm working as a unit officer, but right, you have a game plan. Everybody, very few people show up to a fire and they don't know exactly who's responsible for pulling the line to the front door. They don't know who's going to, very few people don't know who's going to be the one that takes the nozzle through the front door. Everybody has that laid out in their minds. You know where you're going to get on the fire truck and ride. Well, the same thing needs to happen for cardiac arrests, right? There's some key roles that are defined in the IRP appendix that we need laid out before the bells even ring. And that's the CPR boss, the runner, and the clinical decision maker. Those three things need to be defined either on the way to the call if you're at a place where you don't have set riding assignments, or at lineup when you're making out riding assignments, right? The runner is the person who, as soon as you get there, as soon as possible, goes in and starts CPR. The CPR boss needs to know that they're going to be in charge of driving the resuscitation and keeping the resuscitation on task, and the clinical decision maker needs to know that they are responsible for making the medical decisions about what medications to give, when to defibrillate, things like that. If I can have the next slide. All right, spasm. This is your checklist, right? We think of it as a job aid, a mnemonic. These are the 5 things that you need to make sure are done first. When you walk into a cardiac arrest scene or you're faced with a patient who suddenly goes into cardiac arrest, you need to make sure that you stop, right? We see a lot of scenarios where people try and move the patient too soon. We've come a long way in changing that mindset, but when the patient's in cardiac arrest, you need to stop, put the patient down, and commit to the resuscitation. You also need to press. We can press. So manual chest compressions as soon as possible while somebody prepares the defibrillator. Apply the pads, assess for a shockable rhythm, and deliver energy when appropriate, right? So we get back to continuous chest compressions and defibrillation, following the science. Select the paddles. All you have to do is press the lead button once, and that will do it in our current LifePak 15 deployment. And then turn the metronome on. And that's going to give you a click every time you should be pressing on the patient's chest or doing a chest compression. And that will keep you on the right rate that we need to have to increase survivability. If I could get the next one. All right. So What effect does the CPR boss, or an effective CPR boss, have on continuous compressions? If we look at this code stat review, if you look at that and you see that every red line is a chest compression, and then the gaps in the red lines are breaks, what we want to see are compressions done at the right rate, so 102, we want them between 100 and 120, and then we also want to see gaps in compressions less than 10 seconds. The two bars are 10-second, so the bars going up and down are 10-second intervals. So any gap in the red lines, we want to be smaller than one of those bars, and we also want to see it lined up right down the page, every other line. So wherever the gap falls, we want it every other line lined up right down the page. And that's the effect that, that a good CPR boss can have, because they're going to be keeping time, they're going to be driving the resuscitation, and they're going to be reminding the folks pressing on the chest when the intervals are coming up, and they're going to be telling them to get back on the chest within 10 seconds. If I have the next slide, and this is what it looks like when the CPR boss is ineffective. So these were just random cases that I pulled out, and you can't really even tell who they are. I don't even know who they are. But you see haphazard red lines, chest compressions, big breaks, right? So here they went 30 seconds without a chest compression. Then you have breaks looks like every minute. You have a 20-second break right after a 30 or 40-second break, right? None of the gaps, which should be for rhythm checks that should be occurring every 2 minutes, none of them line up, and you can tell that there was nobody keeping track, there was nobody driving the resuscitation, and there was nobody who's really acting as it was either an active, absent or ineffective CPR boss. We'll get to the xylophone in a little while. So that's the that's the difference between having a CPR boss and not having a CPR boss. And this, while you may get a ROSC out of this, it's not, we can't say, well, even though the CPR was bad, we got a ROSC anyway, because in this case, in cardiac arrest, the process matters more than the outcome. Because if you do CPR this way and you don't have an effective CPR boss, and you're not limiting your breaks and compressions to less than 10 seconds, and you're not doing breaks every other, and your timing's off, your defibrillation's off, your rhythm checks are off, you are going to miss out on potential survivors. The science really leads us to believe that. With that, I will turn it over to Lieutenant Henry, who's going to walk us through what he's done is he's developed his own way of doing this, his own implementation strategy for being a CPR boss at Station 25, and I think we all can agree that Station 25 runs a lot of cardiac arrest. Was there a question, Chief Thomas?
Yes, that red line data came from the Life Pack. Is that where it came from?
Yeah, so what happens is every time you transmit to the EPCR, it simultaneously sends that file to what's called CodeStat. And what it's doing is it's using impedance data. So the way the Life Pack works is it measures the resistance in the chest and delivers an appropriate shock. So as it's measuring, when you press on the chest, that impedance fluctuates. So not only is it using to calculate the energy that it's going to be delivering in the next shock, it's also using that to sense when you're pressing on the chest. And then that information is then exported when you send it to the EPCR and analyzed by that separate program called CodeStat. All right, Lieutenant Henry.
So good afternoon. Again, I'm Lieutenant Sam Henry. I work at Station 25 on the A shift, and I've been asked here today to talk about the role of the CPR boss. Again, the CPR boss is an important function to the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest or working code, and like Captain Burns showed, that a good CPR boss and a well-run code can have a positive impact on the incident. Speaking of the incident, on all unit officers should be treating, and remember, all unit officers could be the CPR boss. Like Captain Burns said, according to the IRP, Appendix U, and, the first due heavy piece of apparatus, that unit officer should be fulfilling the role of the CPR boss. So even if a truck squad, regular engine shows up on the scene and 2 paramedic engines show up behind them, that first due engine officer or that first due unit officer should be the CPR boss for the duration of the incident. And the working code is a significant complex incident, and it should be treated as such. And every complex significant incident has 3 phases: a pre-incident phase, an incident phase, and a post-incident phase. So we know that the pre-incident phase is all about preparation. So you need to prepare yourself as the unit officer, as this potential CPR boss. You need to prepare your equipment. You need to prepare your crew. And you need to prepare your station personnel if you're assigned to a station. And when I'm talking about preparing yourself, I'm talking about, being familiar with the Maryland medical protocols on the cardiac arrest, being familiar with the IRP, Appendix U, management of the cardiac arrest. You need to be familiar with all the new technology that's coming out. To be perfectly honest, I'm not the best with technology, so I'm not 100% comfortable with the hand-heavy or the CPR apps that Captain DeMent's going to talk about soon. But you also have to find out the expectations of the EMS duty officer. They're a great resource. A lot of information that is filtered from the EMS section or the EMS division doesn't come to a lot of BLS providers. So Captain DeMent is very good about pushing that information out to the unit officers, so you have a good idea when changes are about to happen, changes that have already happened in interventions, like such as epi going to only 4 epis every 4 minutes, things like that. Also, it's a good idea to talk to your ALS providers. They are a great resource to let you know what's going on in their world, so you can be a good CPR boss and keep track of any new or changing interventions that have time intervals. So preparing yourself. Also, you need to prepare your equipment, and what I mean by that is preparing your PPE, preparing your timing device, and preparing your scribing device. So your PPE, I like to set up in the front seat of the fire engine. With the new fire engines, we have the new map light, so I have a clip on the map light so I can hang my N95 mask, my surgical mask on that. I have a box of gloves behind the MDC, and on top of my box of gloves, I have a small pad with a pen attached to it. So I have all my PPE ready to go. So when we get on the scene of a working code or an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, I don't have to search for PPE. I don't have to say, hey, hand me gloves, hand me a mask, hand me this. I have all that ready to go when I step off the fire engine. Also, with your preparing your equipment is your timing device. My suggestion is to use a timing device that you're most comfortable with. I used to use, my driver used to hand me his watch. It was a great watch that had a timer and everything like that, but I wasn't 100% comfortable with all the buttons and functions on his watch, and a couple times it got hit, and I had to get him to get me back to the timing screen on it. So I always go with what's most comfortable for me. I always use my cell phone. So whether you're using your cell phone, the apparatus phone, a stopwatch, or a wristwatch, just make sure that it's ready to go and that you are familiar with all the buttons and functions. And then lastly, your scribing device. Again, Captain DeMent's going to talk in a little bit about using the hand-heavy app, the CPR Assist. I'm not 100% comfortable with it, so I still use a pad and pen. So first you prepared yourself, you prepared your equipment. Now you got to prepare your crew. And like Captain Burns said, that should happen either prior to lineup or right after lineup, or that you get that 5:45, 6 o'clock call. You can do that going down the road. Everybody on that piece of apparatus needs to know what their assigned roles are. I'm the CPR boss. You're the lead medic or clinical decision maker. You're going to be the clean runner. So again, if you don't do that, at lineup or right after lineup, you need to do that going down the road. But not only do they need to know their roles, they need to know the equipment that they're going to be getting off the apparatus and their initial actions. So now that your crew's prepared, you have to also make sure that if you're assigned to a station, that your station's prepared, that everybody at the station knows they're familiar with the IRP Appendix U, that they're familiar with the Maryland medical protocols concerning cardiac arrest, that they are fully aware of your expectations of them and the different roles that they might be assigned, and the expectations of the EMS duty officer and the department. You also need to make sure that all your station personnel are familiar with all the different equipment that they're going to be using, such as the Lucas and whatnot. So again, pre-incident phase, prepare yourself, prepare your equipment, prepare your crew, prepare your station. After you have all your preparation done, you actually have the incident phase. So we have a 6-minute video that we demoed at Station 25, which is the first 6 minutes of a cardiac arrest. Just a couple points before we show the video is that the clean runner and the equipment is a little bit closer than what we would have liked. Normally, the clean runner and the equipment are outside the room where the patient's being treated, but so we could get everything in the shot, everything's a little bit closer. So when you're watching the video, again, this is for the CPR boss and the perception, the view from them. So keep an eye on how the CPR boss is talking to the other providers, how they're interacting with the lead clinician, where they're standing, and how they're scribing. So if we could play the video, please. All right, Montoya, check for a pulse, please.
No pulse. Stunning compression.
All right, thank you. Dan, you're going to be my clinical decision maker, okay? Start time's going to be 10:36, Dan. Denny, you're going to be my runner, clean runner. If you could just set up all of our equipment.
Denny, I need a bag valve mask, please. Bag valve mask. Thank you.
Denny, can you start them with an oral airway as well? Here you go. Good job, Montoya.
Okay.
All right, Brian, if you could take over bagging so Dan can get freed up. Rob, just to let you know, Dan is going to be our clinical decision maker. You're going to be assisting him.
Okay. Rob, can you get a line started for me, please? Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, we're at 1 minute.
1 minute, okay. All right, dropping an OPA. Denny, in your time, can you see if you can find a history of the patient for us, please? Will do.
Stidham,
Yes, sir.
at the 2-minute mark, you're going to be taking over compressions for Montoya, okay?
Yes, sir.
30 seconds. Suction next to you, Brian. "15 seconds to pulse check. Please pre-charge.
Pre-charge. Pre-charging.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pulse check.
Pulse and rhythm check. No pulse. Asystole.
Continue CPR. All right, Montoya, you're going to get the backboard ready. Dan, if you could let me know when an IO is established.
Yes, sir. work on that now. Robert, you got it?
Brian, use your filter for your.
I is established. Can I please have a bag of ringers and an epinephrine, please, Denny?
1039 IO is established. Please mark it in the monitor.
It is. Okay, you start that over.
One minute to pulse check.
Epinephrine again. Please mark epinephrine in the monitor.
Dan, just double checking. Are we doing 4 minutes on the epi?
That's correct.
All right, I'll give you. I'll let you know when it's time.
What do you want to give fluids or? Okay, we're going to start a fluid bolus at this time.
All right, 30 seconds to pulse check. Stidham, on this pulse check, you're going to rotate to the head. Brian, you're going to rotate out. Montoya, you're going to put the backboard in and then take over compressions. 15 seconds to pulse check. Please pre-charge. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pulse check. Hold. Continue CPR. Just to let you know, Dan, you're 3 minutes away for your next epi.
Denny, can we get another epi ready to go, please? Also the CPAP mask and strap. Medium-sized mask.
After this pulse check, when we get the Lucas hooked up and ready to go, we need to start working on the 4 leads, and we also need to start working on getting a blood sugar. One minute to pulse check.
I've got good bag compliance. Good for the ears and verify this. After this pulse check, we'll do that.
All right. And after this pulse check, you're going to be 1 minute away from your next epi. 30 seconds to pulse check.
Charging.
15 seconds to pulse check. Please pre-charge. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Pulse check. Continue CPR. All right. After this, we're going to start getting the 4 leads on, and we're going to get the blood sugar.
Okay, so there was a few talking points that Captain Burns wanted me to go over about the video. One of them is where I stand. So on a working code, I try to stand in the room where the patient is being treated, but I try to stand out of the way, so I'm not in the way of equipment or personnel coming in and out of the room. I try not to stand in the way of any interventions that the providers are giving the patient, but I do stand close enough so where I can see everything going on. So if there's something that's being missed, I can see that. If something's not going well, I can see that. I can make recommendations to the lead medic or clinical decision maker. And I also need to be close enough so where everybody can hear me talking and giving time intervals. The other thing was, what timer do you use? I talked about that in the first part. I use my phone. Again, it's the most comfortable device that I have, where I know all the buttons, all the switches, so if something does get bumped, I can get back to the screen that I need to get back to. But I am starting to learn the Zillow phone with the hand heavy, but I'm just not 100% compliant with it yet, so I'm still using my cell phone. They wanted me to talk about the interaction with the ALS providers. So I try not to micromanage or harp on the ALS providers, but I do try to give them little reminders here and there. If the 4 leads haven't been put on or something like that, hey, don't forget about the 4 leads. Or if our clean runner, which was our engine driver in the video, if they get patient information from a family member or an on-scene person, and they give that information to me and it's pertinent, I pass that on to the ALS providers. They also wanted to talk about the time interval reminders. So just like the IRP, Appendix U, I try to give 1 minute for pulse checks, 1 minute to pulse checks, 30 seconds to pulse check, 15 seconds to pulse check, pre-charge the monitor, and then 5 seconds to pulse check, and then I count it down. Also, if there is an intervention like epi, so that's every 4 minutes, I'll normally let the medics know at the 2-minute mark, at the 1-minute mark, and then 15 seconds to the minute that it is supposed to be given. One of the last things they wanted me to talk about is how do you scribe. So again, I use just a small notepad and paper. So at the top, I start with when high-performance CPR started. So let's call that 1300. And then I instantly write down when the next pulse check is going to be. So 1302. Okay, if we can get the information from someone on the scene, at the top, I put the last known well time. So let's say that it was a witnessed arrest and it happened at 12:45. I put that at the top. If we don't have that information, I just put a question mark there. That's great information because a lot of times when the EMS duty officer gets on the scene, they'll ask, when was the last known time? How long has the patient been down before high-performance CPR? So I'll always write that at the top. So when we get to the first pulse check to the right, I always put either no pulse or a ROSC. If we don't get a pulse, I just put an X. If we get ROSC, I write ROSC. All right, so we get to the first pulse check. I instantly write down the next pulse check time so I know when I'm keeping track. And then over to the left, I put any interventions. So let's say that the IO was established at 1303. I'll put that over there. All right, so if the first epi was given at the next pulse check, epi 1 at 1304. That way I know, so when I'm telling the medics, hey, you have 2 minutes to the next epi, 1 minute to the next epi, I have all that written down and scribed on the left-hand side. So at this pulse check, we didn't get a pulse. At 1306, again, we didn't get a pulse. So at this point, I'd be telling, because I've already scribed it up here at 1304, I'll be telling the lead clinician, hey, you have 2 minutes to your next epi. So then we get to the next pulse check. I'll count them down for epi number 2, and I'll write that on the left-hand side. And then let's say we got a ROSC. I'll write that on the right-hand side. And I'll continue this until we get to the 30-minute mark and we have TOR, or if we do get ROSC and we transport. And what I do is I tear this sheet off and I give it to the lead clinician, and they take that either with them to the hospital or they can use it for their reports. Now I know that all this information on the left-hand side gets entered into the monitor. Sometimes that stuff gets missed. Sometimes we go to the hospital, and there was an instance where we went to the hospital, and we had gotten ROSC and lost ROSC, got ROSC, came back, and one of the hospital staff started asking questions about when was the last epi, when was this, when was that, and they had already disconnected the monitor, and it was out in the hall, and I just handed over the sheet to the paramedic, and he was able to give all the information to the hospital staff. So that's how I scribe. All right, so once you get past the incident phase, you have the post-incident phase. And just like the post-incident phase of any significant incident, we have to get ready for service. So you have to get yourself ready for service. Restock, set up your PPE, your scribing device, your timing device in your seat. Your crew has to get ready for service, so they have to restock their PPE. Then your units, you got to get your unit and equipment ready for service. So restock your ALS supplies, your BLS supplies, clean and disinfect the Lucas, all that good stuff. After you get everything ready for service, what do we do after every significant incident? We hot wash. Now, sometimes that can happen while you're readying the unit and yourselves for service. So the first thing I do with the hot wash, like we do in any hot wash, I ask if everybody's okay. Oh, we got a question? Go ahead. Oh, so in the hot wash, is everybody okay? Did anybody get injured, pulling, straining anything, lifting or moving the patient? Any exposures? Or if anybody needs any help from EAP. So, we check with our personnel, and then I always go to and I always ask the paramedics first, how do you think the incident went? What went right? What went wrong? Any suggestions? And then I go to the BLS providers, and then what's very important is I always try to include the EMS duty officer. They have a lot of great information, especially Captain Dement always comes to the scene on cardiac arrest, so normally I don't have to pull the information from him. He pushes it to us. If there's good things that we did, praise the good. If there's things that we need to work on, correct the deficiencies right then and there as soon as possible. Captain? Chief, I'm sorry.
All right, a comment and a question. Someone said that the information, the scribe information was very helpful, so that's a good thing. And the question is, what do you do with your scribe notes after the call? Are they part of the patient record, or do you throw them away?
So I turn them over to the paramedic. So the paramedic uses it to do their reports and all that stuff. And once I turn that over to them, they're in charge of destroying it. They don't hand that back to me. So they're in charge of shredding it, destroying it, throwing it out. So that information is uploaded into their patient reports, their EPCR reports, and all that other stuff. But once they do all that, it gets torn up and destroyed. So we've conducted our hot wash, and then just like any other post-incident, share the lessons learned. Go back to your station and share. And this is something that we had to overcome on the call. This was something unique. This is something that we could learn and build upon. Just a quick example: we ran a call where it was a cardiac arrest, working code, and it was in a living room, very dark. The medics we brought in lights, hand lights and their box lights, and they were trying to perform their interventions and actions and everything. And quick thinking without any directions, our clean runner, which is our engine driver, we also call logistics, he ran out and got the portable light tower from the fire engine, the new portable light tower, set that up right in the living room, shined the light to the ceiling. It was like the sunlight was in there. It was great. It was a great thing that he thought of, and now that we've added that as something that we think about on our working codes. So that's all I have. I'm going to turn it over now to Captain Dement. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Henry and Captain Burns. So I want to expand on what they've talked about and just show where we're going from here. Certainly there are a lot of really positive things that the CPR bosses are doing, and scribing is one of them. Each and every one of them has a specific way that they like to do things, and it works for them. And that's very positive. And most of the ones that I've seen have been apps that they've downloaded onto their personal phones. One of the great things about what I'm going to talk about, which is hand-heavy, is the fact that we'll be able to download or export the information from the hand-heavy app directly onto the EPCR. So the hand-heavy app has the ability to take in more information than it would be if we just used the LifePak 15 for importing information that happened over the course of the resuscitation. So, with that said, let's start talking about, hey, where did this hand-heavy thing come from? Well, it started out as a pediatric app that provided us information on how to best manage some of our sickest patients. Certainly, we all know how difficult it is to manage a pediatric arrest or a pediatric very sick person. Well, we found that the app can also provide us very valuable information in managing the cardiac arrest patient in the adult. I'm going to show you exactly on the Zello phone how the app works. Some of you are actually fortunate to have the app on your phones. So if you have that, that's good. The best time to practice and get used to this app is on calls that aren't very high priority calls. Get used to using the app, and what I always like to preach is open the app and get it going while you're responding to the call. A lot of the information that you need to start the app is covered in the MDC. With that said, let's talk about the 5 major things that they talk about. One is this app has a metronome. So the metronome is going to set the rate for the compressor. Once the compressors are engaged, it will set them at a rate of 110. So there's no more guessing on whether you're going too fast or too slow. Another thing it does is it calls out ventilations for you. So the app will say, ventilate, ventilate. So the person who's normally ventilating is our least experienced person, correct? So it seems on most of the cardiac arrests that I respond to. I would like to see that person listen to the hand-heavy app versus counting in their head or watching a light flash on the Lucas device. And that way they can focus more on, again, listening to the app as well as focusing on hand position and the volume of the vent that they're giving, okay? So the next thing the app offers us is an opportunity to notify us to pre-charge the monitor. And that brings up something really interesting because, you know, when we turn the metronome on the LifePak 15, it takes away the audible of the monitor charging. So having the hand-heavy tell you to do this, then you can actually hear your monitor charging. That's something that really works for me, and I think that everybody engaged in a resuscitation will actually notice that, hey, the monitor is charging. Right? Another thing that it does is it actually helps us to monitor the times of our epinephrine administration. So on the app, it will tell you at the 3-minute mark, you advise the clinician or the clinical decision maker that it's time to prepare your next epinephrine. Once you've given that epinephrine, then you select that it's been given and it resets for the next 5-minute cycle. Okay? In addition to that, it will also give us a total time of the actual resuscitation. So from start to finish, it will monitor times, it monitors ventilations, it monitors medication, it monitors any type of equipment that we use, it monitors drip rates, and it monitors electricity. If at any time we deliver a shock, then we can add that to our documentation in a drop-down menu. Yes.
All right, question. After a call, the Lucas manual says to replace the suction cup as a disposable item. Does the EMS section want providers disinfecting the cup or replace it each time? This is unclear in the field.
I would like to see the cup disinfected each time. There will be times where the cup will have to be replaced. Sometimes when you remove the actual cup, it damages the cup so you don't get that seal that you need, or it may just be worn from multiple uses. So just depending on the amount of usage and your determination after cleaning it, if it's met, the standard to stay in place. So good question. It's just going to depend on the amount of use that the Lucas gets and the situation of the call. Certainly, if there's bodily fluids that are, have encompassed the cup, then I would consider replacing it versus cleaning it. Okay? Thank you for your question. Okay, so moving on, I'd like to show you the app, and one thing that really stands out is when you turn the app on and you hit CPR the minute we engage the patient, it's going to automatically start out in a 30-to-2 cycle. We're going to quickly change that to a continuous cycle, and that references or resembles our high-performance CPR, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is, again, like I said, if possible, as you're moving down the road, touch the new patient app. Okay, it's then going to ask me for an age or weight. I'll just scroll all the way to the bottom, and we'll go with an adult. So we're on the scene now, and we have engaged the patient. We're currently doing CPR. Start CPR. You see it started out at 30-to-2. I'm going to change that to continuous. So now that we're in continuous, it's going to start counting my 2-minute cycle. During the 2-minute cycle, at 1 minute and 45 seconds, it's going to tell me to charge the monitor. Okay? Charge the monitor, and it's going to change colors here. So you have not only the ability to see what's happening, but you can hear what's happening. I have it turned down low, but I would advise most of you to have the volume turned up high so that everybody engaged in the incident can actually hear what's going on and they know what to expect, whether it be the runner, the clinical decision maker, or anybody else in the room that's providing some type of service. Okay? When we get to that 1 minute and 45, something in addition to hand heavy that I'm really looking for from an EMS duty officer perspective is preparing for intubation. And that means vigorously deep suctioning your patient during that 15-second period. These are all things that are happening now as we speak, even with our CPR bosses using their own apps. They're just doing it verbally. The hand heavy is actually doing it for us. Okay? We just got the 1 minute 45. We're telling everybody we're charging the monitor. Deep suctioning is happening. When we hit 2 minutes, it's going to let me know, and then it's going to then prepare us for a 10-second rhythm check. So I hit reset. G?
All right, question. How do you log on?
Okay, so how do you log on? The actual hand heavy app is in the Zello phone, and as soon as your license is already ready to go, as soon as you click on the hand heavy on the home screen of the Zello phone, it will populate. Okay, so at this point, now I want to start entertaining other things that the app allows me to do, and that's enter in medications, equipment, or any other thing that I'm doing at that point. So I want to document the fact that we now are bagging the patient. So that's very easy. I just come over to equipment and I scroll here where it says bag valve mask adult. I click on that, successful, and it enters that into my data. Who accounts for ALS? Who has the counts for ALS? Okay, so a lot of times that's the communication that has to take place between the clinical decision maker and the CPR boss. So as a CPR boss, I'm looking to see what's happening with my clinicians. So here we go, we're bagging. I now want to enter another skill set that's been completed. So I go back to equipment, and I want to show that we've started, okay? So we stopped there for a second, and we're back to, we're charging the monitor again, and we're going to go right back to CPR after the monitor is finished charging, and we've checked for a pulse. And at this point, all I'm going to do is reset. And now I'm back to looking for all my other interventions. Okay, so say I want to do an easy IO. Enter that, successful. It's now in my database. So this is time sensitive because I want the time to resemble exactly when it's happening. So real time, this stuff needs to occur. Now I want to give that dose of epinephrine. So I go over here to meds. Click meds, and I want to scroll to epi, 1 to 10,000. Enter, I'm going to do IO, green, and now that gives me my epi time frame. So for just the purposes of this, on our next check, we're going to notice a rhythm change. After the first epi, that's remarkable, but it does happen. Okay, it's a good time for a question.
All right, 3 questions on here. Can you put it on your personal phone, the app?
The app can be put on your personal phone. Unfortunately, we don't have enough licenses for everybody to have one, and that's why it's loaded on every Zello phone.
Okay.
Okay, so we're in our 2-minute, we're charging the monitor at this point. We're waiting, we're deep suctioning if intubation hasn't already occurred. If intubation did occur, then it would be documented here in my equipment. Okay, so we check the rhythm. And now I want to say that we got ROSC in the field. Hit OK. Now this blue arrow here is going to allow me to export and upload the information all regarding the incident. So I'm going to come here and I want to validate that everything is correct, which I do here, and then I submit. This information is now ready to be uploaded onto the EPCR, or the patient care report, and is available for us to go back and review later as a group, along with the code stat documentation. Question?
All right. Have the county IT security folks and the county attorney's office opined about any risk of having this information on a personal device and any residual data that may remain after syncing it with a EPCR?
That's a good question. I don't know about the legalities of having such an app on a personal phone. I know that we train with the Hand-Heavy app with our personal phones, and I would encourage our clinicians to use the Zello phone when applying the HandTevi app to a patient.
Chief Costman helped answer that question. He said there's no PHI in the app. And then the third question was already answered by what you said.
So along with this, I would encourage you to revisit this with your EMS duty officer to talk more about the exporting and uploading information. It's very easy to do. It's very user-friendly. And that's all I have as far as the HandTevi. Yes.
All right, one more. How do you link a HandTevi session to a specific patient?
So once you go into the app, it will ask you if you want to add a patient. That's like the first thing it asks you, if you want to add a patient. You just click on adding a patient, and that becomes one in itself. So once you start that app and you end it, then that's the end of that data for that particular incident.
We'll post a link to the instructions of how to get the information from HandTevi into your PCR. You'll probably have to repeat that because I can't. But yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll share some additional information that shows the clinician how to export the information from the HandTevi to the EPCR. And it's very easy. And actually, by doing it this way, it allows you to share more information than you would if you just used the monitor. Okay? Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Captain, thank you very much. Just a couple of real quick housekeeping things. And as I sit here and watch this, and we all know how important this high-performance CPR is and good high-performance CPR is, but before we, and it might have been talked about, I might have missed it and I apologize, what takes me back really is that on average, we're going to go to 3 cardiac arrests today. And one of those persons is we're going to achieve ROSC on. That's an amazing number to me. The other real amazing number is, how long have we been doing high-performance CPR? 2 years, roughly? So there are 60 people walking around the county because of good high-performance CPR. So it's working. And those two numbers, just taking away those numbers, it's just phenomenal to me. So the video that Lieutenant Henry showed, we will link that or put that up on the Challenge in the Streets page on Quick Links. And then the 2 things that we have upcoming, our next thing is a Boss Talk. It is on April 13th, and it's a roundtable review. We're coming up on the 1-year mark for our Boss Talk, just right around the 1-year mark. So Chief Bailey from Human Resources, Chief Kerrigan from Operations, Chief Davis, and myself will just have a roundtable discussion about some of the things that we have seen, some of the directions, just some of the common threads that we've seen through these Boss Talks and the direction that the organization is working on going. And then our next Challenge in the Street, April 28th, Lieutenant Martinez is doing that. He will do it here from the Training Academy, and the topic will be portable ground ladders. So until next time. Yeah, until next time, you can sit and enjoy this video, little old video that we have from MCFRS today. Thank you.